All right, this is going to be video 2 of your isometric drawings. Again, you'll want a pencil today. You will also want a pen, and we are also going to be using a protractor or a ruler or some sort of straight edge. And today what we're going to be doing is talking about our invisible box. All right, and an invisible box is kind of my trick on how to create a isometric drawing if you're struggling with it. And even if you're not struggling, it's kind of a good tool and good practice to kind of check to make sure you're doing everything correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and write down the steps of how to create the invisible box, and then as I am writing down the steps over here, I am also going to visually show you what each of those steps look like. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and title my notes Steps to Create the Invisible Box. I'm going to underline that so that I know that that is a new heading, but organize yourself however you need to. All right, so the first thing that we need to know about our invisible box is that we are going to construct it using construction lines. So step 1, we're going to use the width, the height, and the depth to create the box. Using construction lines. And construction lines we're going to talk a little bit more about when we get to our alphabet lines here in a few days. But that is kind of a key term, so I'm going to write that in a different color. All right, using construction lines. And what construction lines are is, we kind of talked about them in our orthographic drawing. All right, and what they are very light lines. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that down just in case. Okay, so they are light, very light. Actually, I probably should have wrote very before that. That's okay. And they are solid, so they are light, solid lines. Okay. And going back to our orthographic drawings, just to give you a visual of what our construction lines are. Our construction lines were these really light lines that we used. I called them guidelines as well, but they're helping us guide where we need to eventually put lines. All right, so our construction lines are going to be light, solid lines. And what I want to go ahead and do is create a doorstop as our kind of follow along example, because I know everybody knows what a doorstop is. All right, or if you prefer to call it a wedge, you can call it a wedge. I'm totally fine with that too. They're essentially the same thing. All right, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is create a wedge. So this is my example. I'm going to do this in pencil because we're going to be using construction lines. Construction lines look something like that. So if you want to draw an example in your notes. Sorry, I was lagging a little bit. If you want to draw an example line in your notes, that's probably not an awful idea, but it's a line that is so light, if you were to erase it, there would be no pencil mark left over. All right, so some of you have a very heavy hand when you write and everything is very dark. Construction lines, you literally just want to very lightly drag your pencil across the piece of paper so you can barely see it. All right, So I'm going to use a pencil for this, and then when I'm done, I will go over my lines with my pen. So I'm going to encourage you to do the same. So here is my wedge example. And the first thing that we need to do with any object that we are creating is we need to identify the overall width, the overall height, and the overall depth of your object. All right, so I'm going to label my width, my height, and my depth. All right, and I'm just going to make up numbers for right now. So I'm going to say my overall width is 5 inches. And you always want to make sure that you're identifying your units, because units are one of the most important things in order to communicate your drawings and ideas most effectively. I'm going to make the height 1.5 inches, and I'm going to make the depth, let's do 2 inches. Okay, a little bit of a variety. All right. So now that we have identified the overall width, the overall height, and the depth, now we can use construction lines to create this box. Okay, so like we did up here, we're going to create a 3D box, but now we're going to use these dimensions. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my point right here. So this is going to be my starting point. This is kind of where I'm at in reference. All right. My width right here is going to be in my front view, and from this point my width dimension goes back into the left. So for every, let's see, every one line on my drawing equals 1 inch for our dimensions. Let's use that scale. Okay, so we're going to go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So this point here is going to be right here. Then we have a height of 1.5. So again, one line equals 1 inch. So I'm going to come up one line and then half of another line. I don't like that. Let's change our height to 2. Let's keep it easy on you for this first activity. Sorry about that. Let's go, our height is 2. That way we know that we're going to follow on our lines perfectly. Okay, so if we know our height is 2, we went up 2 lines here, then we need to make the height of 2 here as well. And then we know that we can close that front view. So this is my front view here, which matches this front view here. Okay. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to use the depth. So starting back at my start point, I know that this line going back at a 30-degree angle is going to be my depth, and my depth is going to be 2. I know my height is also 2. And I'm going to close that box, and in this box is going to be your right side view. Then I'm going to come back my depth of 2. My W is going to get cut off a little bit, but that's okay. And I'm going to close that top view of my box. All right, so this is your invisible box. All right, we've created it with light, solid construction lines. View video 3 for step number 2 of the invisible box process.